Hello everyone. Today's case is hitting its 40-year mark, when a child would vanish from her apartment building while going down to play with a friend. It's actually one of the first cases I covered on this channel, and it's actually the reason I started this channel. Because her case wasn't talked about enough here on YouTube, despite it being so ingrained in my memory as a child. Since then, more people have covered Nicole's case, and I am very happy that that has happened. But it made me realize that there are so many cases out there that don't get enough coverage. Nicole's disappearance really set fear among parents in the 80s and the 90s, and since she disappeared in the same area where my family lived, I vividly remember her case and being told not to go off alone. With this being the 4th decade with no answers as to what happened to Nicole, I think it's important that we revisit her case and continue to push for justice since her mother passed away quite a few years ago and her father is only getting up in age. He needs to know what happened to his little girl before it's too late. But unfortunately, a needle in a haystack would be easier to find. Nicole Louise Morin was born April 1st of 1977 to her mother Jeanette and father Arthur Art Morin, who was a truck driver. Jeanette and Art had been married for 12 years prior to Nicole's birth, but would separate about 6 years after. Prior to her marriage to Art, Jeanette had bared a son with another man who took her son and fled with him. The details as to if the father had kidnapped their child and fled with him, or if this was like a consensual agreement, or if there were legal things at play here, aren't really clear. All that is stated is that a child from a previous marriage was taken from her by the boy's father. What is known is that 15 years later, the son would come knocking at Jeanette and Art's door. After the separation, 8-year-old Nicole and her 50-year-old mother would move into a 2-bedroom penthouse on the 20th floor of an apartment building located at 627 The West Mall. This apartment building is located in Etobicoke, a suburb west of Toronto, Ontario, Canada. It's actually the area of the GTA that I grew up in. My family lived only a 10-minute drive from where Nicole would disappear, which is why this case has been so stuck with me over the years. 46-year-old Art was living in Mississauga at the time, the city just west of Etobicoke. Nicole was said to be like any normal 8-year-old girl. She had a happy-go-lucky, cheerful personality. Her favorite place to eat was McDonald's, and she loved going to Ontario Place, which was an entertainment venue, event venue, and park in Toronto. It's also a place that I frequented as a child in the late 90s and early 2000s. I think that era, it was definitely a place where a lot of children in Toronto were taken. Nicole was also said to be taking swimming and dance lessons at the time while attending Wellsworth Junior School, where she was in 3rd grade. Her bedroom was filled with stuffed toys, dolls, an etching of Donald Duck hung on the wall alongside a sketch of Nicole from the C&E. She also had a pet rat named Bluebell. Her friend Melissa Laschuk would later become a police officer and describe Nicole by saying, quote, "Nicole and I would walk to school together every day. We had a lot of fun playing together. We would make our own fun using our imagination and playing outside. And we used to go swimming all the time in the pool that was for our particular building. We got along really, really well. We found the same things funny." End quote. On a particularly hot day on July 30th of 1985, Nicole was on summer vacation and had made plans to go to the apartment building's supervised pool with her friend Jen. This was the first year that she was able to venture out of the apartment because she was finally tall enough to reach the penthouse button at the top of the elevator if she stretched to push it. I think it's also important to note that there are 2 different pools at this apartment building. An indoor pool that is shared between 627 The West Mall and 714 The West Mall and is located between the 2 buildings. As you can see, the indoor pool is a short walk from the lobby of Nicole's building. The second pool is an outdoor pool near a playground, which is located at the rear of 627 The West Mall. And I think it's important to talk about these 2 pools because I've actually seen mixed reporting on which pool Nicole may have went to that day. According to a podcast that was actually produced by the Toronto Police, they shared a picture of the indoor pool shared by the 2 buildings. However, it was noted in the comment section that the authorities got quite a lot of facts wrong in Nicole's case while producing this podcast, including the fact that they said that her father Art was in jail at the time of her disappearance, which isn't true. I don't know where they got this information or if they mixed it up with another local case. Or if it is true, I have never heard of it in this case before, and apparently no one else has either. What I do know is that most reports state that the 2 girls were planning to go to a supervised pool at the rear of the building. Some articles state it was one of the pools. But considering it was summertime, it would make sense that the girls were planning to go to the outdoor pool. I think another reason this case has stuck with me for so long is that I also have vivid memories of going to extremely similar pools at large apartment buildings like this growing up when I was Nicole's age. There are even times that I remember in the late 90s and early 2000s where all of the parents, and my parents included, would allow the lifeguard to take all of us kids down the street to the convenience store or to the country style. It's like a Tim Hortons, like a coffee shop, to get donuts or treats. I don't even know how old these lifeguards were that were allowed to do this. I want to guess they were probably teenagers. But I feel like that's just something that you wouldn't see nowadays, where a bunch of parents would allow a teenager or just a random lifeguard that was there to take all of these young kids, a couple blocks away to get treats. They're some of the most vivid memories I have, though, of growing up in a very similar situation that Nicole did, in a large apartment complex with an outdoor pool. All the kids gather there during the summer. I grew up in the same area, in the same buildings. And honestly, it probably could have been any one of us that something like this could have happened to. But unfortunately, it happened to Nicole. Over the phone, the two girls would make plans to meet up with each other in the apartment's lobby at 11 a.m. This was said to be a regular meetup spot for the girls. At approximately 10:30 a.m., Nicole had gone downstairs to the lobby to get some mail for her mother before returning upstairs with no incident. She then put on a peach-colored one-piece bathing suit with colored stripes at the front, a green headband, and red canvas shoes. The last time Jeanette would see her daughter is as she was finishing up some food. She had grabbed a peach-colored blanket and purple beach towel, which was placed into a plastic bag along with her black swim goggles, a bottle of suntan lotion, a blue comb, and her swimming pass. Before leaving her apartment, Nicole would speak to Jen via the intercom in the apartment building and told her that she would meet her in the lobby shortly. Nicole then said goodbye to her mother and walked out of her apartment door, heading towards the 3 elevators. Jen would allegedly watch as the elevators traveled twice from the penthouse floor and arrived empty at the lobby after stopping at other floors. Meanwhile, in a 1987 article in the Etobicoke Guardian, it states that a woman rode down the elevator with Nicole, who saw her get off at the lobby. She then continued to the basement level and left in her car. It stated that police believed at the time that she was the last person to see Nicole, but as you will see, that's not the only narrative. And that's also not the narrative that has been pushed over all of these decades. What we do know is that there is this alleged witness, this woman that may have spotted Nicole either on the penthouse floor, in the lobby, or somewhere around there at that time. Although we also have no information on this woman. And her version of events also don't really make sense. Because after waiting around for 15 minutes, Jen would buzz back upstairs to Nicole's apartment. Jeanette would answer, and she was greeted by Jen, who asked once again when Nicole was coming down to meet her. Jeanette at first wasn't very startled by the absence of her daughter. It seems like she assumed that Jen may have missed her in the lobby and that Nicole was probably already at the pool playing with other kids. As you can see at this building, and also just in this time period in general, a lot of young kids were allowed to roam around freely. We talk about a lot of these cases. I know a lot of people will combat that by saying, well, I wasn't allowed to, or I didn't allow my children to. That's understandable. And that's also what a lot of people learned from these cases happening, is that maybe we should keep our children closer and keep a closer eye on our children. But we can't deny that it did happen, that a lot of children were allowed to just run around freely without parental supervision or adult supervision, because we have so many of these cases as examples of, the bad things that could happen when children are allowed to roam around freely. And that kind of just sets the scene of what it was like in the mid-80s. It was pretty normal for a lot of children to run around their neighborhoods and, hop from friend's home to friend's home and eventually come home when the streetlights come on. So Jeanette wasn't very concerned. And on top of that, at the time, Jeanette was running an in-home daycare, so she couldn't just leave all the little kids she was watching to go downstairs to check on Nicole. Now, should someone have gone and checked up on her? Should she have asked maybe a neighbor, someone? You know what? Hindsight is 20/20. And as I said, it wasn't unusual for children to, go from home to home to hang out with different kids. She could have been anywhere. And I'm sure, again, this wasn't out of the ordinary for children to be doing this. Although it is important to note that this was, the first summer it seems like that Nicole was allowed to do this. Jen would go on to wait in the lobby, but as time passed with no signs of Nicole, she had eventually headed off and went to play at the pool. It wouldn't be until 4 hours later, around 3 p.m., that Jeanette would realize that Nicole still hadn't came back from playing and swimming. And that is when she started to get worried. Now, again, this is where I've seen some differing reports of timelines. I've read in newspaper articles that were reported at the time that a superintendent at the building was the one that notified the police after a 3-hour search turned up no results of Nicole. But then in other reports, I see it was specifically 3 p.m. that the police were called. What we do know for sure, though, is that several hours had passed since 11 p.m. when Nicole had left her apartment before authorities were called and an official search would start. But once authorities were called, Nicole's disappearance would launch what would be called Toronto's most extensive search in the city's history. Jeanette and Art were said to be pretty quickly cleared as suspects. They were both interviewed separately, and Art voluntarily took a lie detector test to clear himself. After Nicole had been missing overnight, the media began to gather, and the police intensified their search and brought in officers from right across Metro Toronto and started to basically fan out across Etobicoke looking for every possible location where they might find something. This led police to conduct door-to-door searches of the other tenants' apartments in the building. Keep in mind, this building has 429 units. It was also noted that police entered apartments even if no one answered, not caring about whether they were violating people's rights or not. Meanwhile, police set up roadblocks to investigate vehicles coming and going from the area. But keep in mind, if Nicole was kidnapped, there was hours and hours of a lead that this individual would have had on police, so they may not have even been in the area anymore. They also used what they called at the time as a public address system to alert neighbors and residents of Nicole's description. The following day, tracking dogs were said to be brought in to investigate the underground garage, utility rooms, storage units, and sub-pump rooms. More than 900 neighborhood residents were said to help in the search. Mounted horsemen, marine units, helicopters, and foot patrols combed the area near Highway 27, which was in the vicinity of the apartment buildings. Ranger Helicopters, which was a private charter firm, donated a chopper, a pilot, and dedicated 50 free hours to scan rooftops of nearby buildings for any sign of Nicole. Hundreds of residents at local apartment buildings were also interviewed. Police were also given lists of tenants in each apartment building in that nearby area by the superintendents. All of this was turned in at a command post, and then on top of that, they were even trying to phone all of the residents that were missed. Cal Miller, a retired Toronto crime reporter, would enter the Morin apartment to find both Jeanette and her estranged husband Art sitting inside. He recalled them talking quietly for a while, stating they looked devastated and were just moving mechanically. Janet Jessup, the mother of 9-year-old Christine Jessup, who was abducted and murdered just months earlier, would offer her support to the Morin family. Janet saying it was helpful to talk to someone who had suffered the same way, saying, quote, "We know what they are going through. We've been there. God willing, it won't go too long. We've got to find this girl quickly. We shared our experience. There's no one else who knows the feeling." End quote. In the following days, a vigil would be held for Nicole, where Jeanette would say that she knew someone had killed her daughter, saying, quote, "She's my baby, and I don't know what I'll do if anything happened to her. She got that Cabbage Patch doll for Christmas, and that one when she got her weight to 50 pounds. I just wish my little girl was here. I wish this was a bad dream and it would end. I didn't call her in as a missing child earlier because she's always out playing with Jennifer. This is why I didn't worry. The two girls are like sisters." End quote. Despite how Jeanette felt, Art remained positive because there was no evidence that, suggested that his daughter was murdered. Nicole's friend Melissa, who was in Portugal at the time, would later say, quote, "I truly believe it could easily have been me and not her. She was going for a swim, and we literally used to go for a swim together all the time. I'd either meet her upstairs in her penthouse or she'd come down and we could meet in the elevator." End quote.
Like everybody, I was shocked. I was really young, so I don't think I truly appreciated the gravity of the situation. I was out of the country the day that it happened, which I guess in a way is either lucky or unlucky. Perhaps if I had been with her, it wouldn't have happened to her. However, it may have happened to somebody else. And by being away, certainly she was alone that day. We would often go to the swimming pool together. So now that I'm older and I do have an appreciation for it, there is a little bit of regret that perhaps I wasn't there for her at the time. As a parent, it's scary. This world seems to get scarier and scarier. So from that perspective, I do worry that for the safety of my children, but life has to go on, and we have to provide, a good, stable home for our kids and keep them as safe as possible. So I strive to do that every day. Mm-hmm. But from a police perspective, being in the position that I'm in allows me to keep an eye on what's going on with the case. And so I can say with confidence that the case has never been discarded. It's never been put aside. And I know that the Toronto Police Service has maintained a vigilant eye on what's been going on. I'm very hopeful that someone will come forward with information. I think that people have a mentality that perhaps information that they know isn't important, or perhaps the police already have the information. So why come forward? Why tell the police? And I think that what's important to remember is that you don't know what the police know and what they don't know. And there are so many pieces of the puzzle. And the piece that you have might be the piece that we need, might be that last little bit that will connect all the other pieces that we have. So there's nothing that is insignificant. She was smart, she was fun. We got along very well. You know, she was the sister I didn't have at the time.
The city and community was extremely active in Nicole's search. Offers from groups, individuals, and corporations who were anxious to lend a helping hand in any way they could would pour in. The newly formed Toronto Crime Stoppers organization took on the disappearance as its first significant case. This organization posted a $1,000 reward, printed posters, and produced a video reenactment of Nicole's last known movements, which aired on television several weeks later. The Toronto Star would print 6,000 copies of a poster showing Nicole's picture and the phone number of the Metro Toronto Police. They also put posters on 75 of their delivery trucks. 3,000 copies of a watercolor sketch of Nicole were commissioned by the Toronto Police and distributed to the police departments, post office, and local stores. 2 groups dedicated to looking for missing children also joined in the search. Search, Track, and Rescue Emergency Services organization took directions and searched a corner of Centennial Park. The ESO group worked out of the Weston Road and Finch Avenue area. These 2 groups were said to be highly organized and used radio communication that was praised in papers. Boy Scout leaders offered aid in the search, in addition to scores of residents, relatives, and friends of the family. Food for volunteers was stocked in the lobby of the West Mall apartment, consisting of chicken, muffins, pop, sandwiches, cookies, and fruit. Food was also provided to the Morins during this time. Etobicoke Mayor Bruce Sinclair offered to assist in any way and volunteered as staff. The vice president of the apartment complex saying, quote, "You don't realize how terrible the situation is until it strikes close to home. There's an initial shock that it could happen in broad daylight, but now everyone is just doing whatever they can to help." End quote. A 20-member task force would end up being formed by Toronto Police that remained active for 9 months following Nicole's disappearance. By November, police had questioned 6,000 people, including hundreds of sex offenders, and offered a $100,000 reward. You do have to remember, though, that both the technology and the techniques that were used back in the 80s aren't the same as we use today. So it does make me wonder if something could have been missed. Despite that, it is noted that police did take hair from Nicole's hairbrush, lifted fingerprints from her bedroom. Art brushes were also said to be taken to be examined, as well as a plaster cast of Nicole's hand that was made in a grade 2 project was collected. But one strange thing was found. Inside of the Morin apartment, a handwritten note by Nicole was found that had been written months prior that read, "I'm going to disappear." That note has sparked a lot of conversation and controversy over the years. At least 2 commercial companies had also made deliveries at the apartment building during the time that Nicole would have been going downstairs to meet up with Jen. And police wanted to question anyone that had been in the lobby of the apartment area, the back door, or the basement and the parking garage the day that Nicole disappeared. But hope was dwindling. It was very unusual not to find anything, any clues, any evidence, any signs of a missing person. Every square inch of the area had been searched, from the terrain to the trash bin, stairwells, inside parked cars. Even a plywood box used to store salt for the winter was said to be searched. Nothing was said to be overlooked. As I stated, apparently police even went into people's apartments who weren't home, even though they didn't have search warrants to do so. They didn't care that they were breaking, the rules and people's privacy because they were trying to find this little girl. Yet despite doing all of this and pulling out apparently all the stops, Nicole was not found, and there was literally no sign, no evidence of her. Not the bag of stuff she was carrying, not a headband, not a shoe. Nothing was found. At one point in the investigation, police even traveled to Quebec to interview Art Morin's brother-in-law, who was convicted of murdering Art's sister Gertrude in 1961. He has since died, and police determined he was not in Toronto at the time of Nicole's disappearance. Despite that, there's still a lot of conversation around if he could have been involved in this or not. In the midst of his daughter's disappearance, Art would actually quit his job to set up an office and spent the next few years hiring PIs and doing anything possible in his power to spread the word about his missing daughter. He even sent posters to world embassies in hopes that if she was taken out of the country, that she would be recognized and found. After a tip would come in of a girl matching Nicole's description on Vancouver Island, Art would fly across the country to go investigate this lead and see if this truly was his little girl. But in the end, the little girl didn't turn out to be Nicole. Clues would be sought after in the US as well. It's said that almost 9,000 police and sheriff's agencies were sent letters as well regarding Nicole's disappearance. Art saying in a telephone interview, quote, "Still hopefully something will be turned up. The US was really covered as adequately as Canada. I think Nicole may have been taken to the United States at the onset. It is quite feasible, and she could get lost in the large country." End quote. Jeanette and Art would actually reconcile their marriage for around a year after Nicole's disappearance, but after that, they would once again separate in 1987. Jeanette moved out of the building soon after and ended up actually consulting a psychic in Calgary in hopes of trying to get answers. Art, on the other hand, didn't believe in psychics. In the end, hundreds of volunteers had showed up, along with a 20-person police task force, and over 25,000 hours were spent investigating leads. But despite all of that, no concrete evidence has ever been found as to what happened to Nicole. No physical evidence has ever been found that links to Nicole's disappearance. As I said, not her swim towel, her swimsuit, her shoes, a hair, no video footage of her. To this day, it's said that there is still a dedicated task force made up of 3 officers, led by Constable Nicole Sutton, who are still looking for Nicole. They organize runs and candle vigils and hope to help keep Nicole's memory alive, and Constable Sutton says that they still receive tips. Child Find Ontario also helped by having Nicole's picture appear on electronic signs at Esso gas stations, billing envelopes for Rogers Cable, and the CIBC Toronto Transit Commission display screens, and on the back of transport trucks. In the end, it was estimated that $1 to $2 million had been spent trying to find Nicole. The following year, in May of 1986, carnation flowers would be sold on the streets of downtown Toronto to raise money for further searches for Nicole. Their hopes were to raise $15,000 for the Nicole Morin Trust Fund in order to supply new posters and pay for the PI Art had hired, which had charged $20,000 for the initial cost. The Cash and Carry Flower Market had volunteered their resources, hoping to sell 6,000 bunches of flowers at $5 a bunch from 3 downtown locations, including King and Bay, Adelaide and York, and Bay and Wellington streets. An ad would also be put out in the papers in the fall of that year asking for funds to help in the search. In 2001, Toronto Crime Stoppers would release an age-enhanced photo of Nicole. Many more would be created over the years to depict her at different ages. This was circulated to 17 countries over the internet. In 2004, something very disturbing came to light. Researchers for a Belgian organization claimed that they had matched Nicole's photo from a Canadian police website with a child on a PDF file network in Zandvoort, which is in the Netherlands. Which, a lot of people kind of sway that way sometimes when a child goes missing. Could they be kidnapped for nefarious means like this to produce CP or CSAM? And that is one of the worst case scenarios we could ever hope for. Now, either unfortunately or fortunately, the way you want to look at this, no physical evidence has ever been, recovered to prove that, the little girl that they seen in this footage was Nicole. Which, if this footage does exist out there, I truly hope that they figure out who this child was, they can get justice, they can find that missing child if the child is missing. Clearly, they seen something that concerned them, they found something that concerned them, and there was what most likely was a little girl in this footage. So whether it was Nicole or not, I truly hope that they tracked that down and they solved that so that this cannot continue to happen and that little girl can be found and justice can be given to her. Several video reenactments of Nicole's last movements have been produced over the years, including a 2007 television reenactment for GTA's Most Wanted. That same year, Nicole's mother would pass away without any answers as to what happened to her daughter. On July 29th of 2014, police would make a public statement that they were reopening Nicole's case and would release a second reenactment video. A woman named Billie Joe would end up watching this video, and it sparked a memory in her from when she was a child. As we all hope that, spreading the word on these cases and creating videos like this or sharing up missing persons flyers and case stories, go. That's, at the end of the day, that's what we hope for. That it gets to someone who has answers that maybe they didn't know, that police didn't have, or they didn't remember that they had, as with Billie Joe here. Because when Billie Joe seen this video, it led her to call police. It would turn out that a day or two after Nicole had vanished, a little girl would be heard screaming in the woods by farm owners on Horseshoe Valley Road near Barrie. This area is a rural side road over an hour north of Nicole's West Mall apartment. Billie Joe Player would claim that her and her mother heard a little girl yelling, "Stop, please, you're hurting me," and then silence. Her mother had instantly thought about the little girl who had been taken from Toronto. Nicole Morin, saying, quote, "I truly believe I heard Nicole being killed. I know what I heard. My mother knew what she heard. The neighbors heard it as well. Nobody will ever be able to tell me that I didn't hear a little girl die that day." End quote. The screams were said to be so loud that even neighbors heard and made reports. Despite allegedly calling the police and reporting this, Billie Joe doesn't remember any searches being done. Decades later, in 2014, when, police put out this video and Billie Joe called in, they decided to interview her, and that led to that area being searched.
Police officers and cadaver dogs are combing the woods near Barrie for a second day, hoping to find any clues in connection to Nicole Morin's disappearance. She was only 8 when she went missing nearly 3 decades ago. Sue Scambatti joins us now from Springwater Township with the update. Sue.
Well, thanks, Dwight. We just heard from Toronto Police Inspector Jerry Cashman just a short time ago. This search is over. It began yesterday morning and went on all day today. But I'll quote Inspector Cashman, who told the media, "We've done as thorough a job as we could have. We've come up with nothing conclusive." Now, this ground search here in Springwater Township, north of Barrie, involved about 40 police officers from Toronto Police and the OPP, ground penetrating radar, cadaver dogs, and GPS. And today there was a point of interest where the cadaver dogs, according to police, found something unusual. Then they brought in the ground penetrating radar. We saw officers then going in with shovels and spades, but Inspector Cashman says that was just one suspicious area that they did some digging in and found nothing, and there were at least one other suspicious area where they did digging. Now, this search was prompted by a tip that came into Toronto Police this past July or early August. July 30th, 1985 was when Nicole Morin vanished from her Etobicoke apartment after leaving the penthouse apartment to go down to the lobby to meet a friend to go swimming. A tip that was originally called into the OPP nearly 30 years ago was called in again to Toronto Police. A family had heard or seen something suspicious here, and that's why police came to scour 100 acres of woods, but they found nothing. Police say, sadly, the search for Nicole Morin continues, the investigation continues. The flip side of that is, perhaps there's still some hope that she may still be alive.
In more recent time, in 2022, there would be another extensive search. Police, along with cadaver dogs, would search an Etobicoke park, which led to a dog hitting at a specific area, meaning the dog most likely detected the scent of human remains. However, the area that it's claimed the dog hit was said to have really dense foliage and it was hard to get to. However, this is the police and they're searching for a missing child, so you'd think that dense foliage wouldn't stop them from, pulling out all the stops. They've already did it, over all these decades. To solve this case, you're going to let a little bit of, bush and trees not solve it. It doesn't make sense to me that they said it was too dense of foliage. However, it's been 3 years since that news report came out and that search happened. So I'm not sure whatever came of that. It seems like nothing may have, at least nothing that was reported on. So let's talk about the theories in Nicole's disappearance, because there are some very interesting ones. What's very interesting is that around the time Nicole was abducted, 3 other little girls would go missing in the area. Christine Jessup was 9 years old when she disappeared from her home on October 3rd of 1984, just 9 months before Nicole vanished. Her body would end up being found 3 months later. Christine had been essayed and stabbed to death. 36 years later, her killer was found to be Calvin Hoover, who died in 2015. 9-year-old Sharon Morningstar Keenan was abducted in January of 1983. Her body was found a week later. Her case is one that I've covered before, due to her suspected murderer to be Dennis Melvin Howe, who fled after the murder and has never been apprehended. The question being, could Dennis have more victims? 11-year-old Allison Parrott disappeared in July of 1986 after being lured out of her home in Toronto. Her body was found 2 days later in a densely wooded area of Kingsmill Park in Etobicoke, only 9 kilometers from where Nicole would vanish. All of these little girls being murdered around that same time, yet Nicole's body was never found. It leads to the question, could Nicole have also been a victim of one of these men or another man that was never caught that was committing similar crimes? There seems to have been a lot of them happening in the mid to late 80s in Toronto. In 1988, an American drifter named Lovey Riddle would confess to killing Nicole, but police were skeptical early on due to his conflicting stories. We also need to talk about that note that Nicole had left saying that she was going to go missing. It turns out that 2 weeks prior to Nicole's disappearance, Nicole and her mother had watched a TV program on missing children. At the time, Jeanette had taught Nicole how to dial long-distance phone numbers in case something similar had happened to her. So could that be the reason that she doodled that in her book? Children do strange things sometimes. But that means that not only was she taught what to do if she was kidnapped, but she was also told not to talk to strangers, leading to a lot of friends and residents finding it really hard that Nicole would have been kidnapped in broad daylight without a struggle. But we do have to remember, she was a small little girl. She was only 8 years old. A large adult male could easily just snatch her up and run off. But again, this happened in broad daylight, in the middle of the afternoon. However, a big theory is that someone kidnapped Nicole from the elevator on the way down, but that would require some timing. Remember, this was the first year Nicole was allowed to go up and down the elevator by herself. So this would mean that the person who took Nicole would have either had to, stalk her over the last months or so that she was allowed to do this, learn her routine, which she most likely did have one if she was going down quite often to play with her friends at the pool. But then they would also have to know that she was coming down the elevator at that specific time. Maybe it's possible someone overheard her talking with Jen that she was going to be going down soon. And as they seen the elevator going up, they could have hit their floor, hoping that when the elevator opened, as Nicole came back down, she would be in there. And when the elevator doors did open, they could have snatched her out and took them into her apartment or took her down possibly, to the parking garage. Or it also just could have been a motive of opportunity. Someone was, about to head down, the doors opened. They could have been a PDF file. There's an 8-year-old girl there. They decided to act on it. I have covered a case before where something similar happened. A little girl was walking home from her friend's house, and this PDF file had been watching, CSAM CP all day and stepped outside on his porch, seen a little girl walk by and decided, I'm going to try it for myself. Motive of opportunity, wrong place, wrong time. It's possible something similar happened to Nicole. But you do have to remember that both of these scenarios would be extremely risky to do, especially in the middle of broad daylight. In a building that has over 400 different units, there's people everywhere constantly coming and going. But to make matters worse, if Nicole was kidnapped, the 427 highway ran right behind the West Mall apartment, meaning if Nicole was taken, she could have been taken far away very quickly. It would also just be over an hour to take her across the border into the US from that very highway. And remember, this is the 80s. Let me know down below if you crossed the border in the 80s from Canada to the US, but what kind of precautions did they really go to back then to search vehicles and question people that were crossing the border? I'm very curious. Could there have been a little girl in someone's trunk and, did they scan cars back then like they do today? Would they have even known? In a 2014 article, Art would compare Jeanette's son disappearing and returning home to his daughter's situation, hoping that the same thing could happen to his little girl, hoping that one day she would just turn up on his doorstep. One of the most prominent but mysterious theories is that of the blonde woman, an approximately 35-year-old woman described as attractive, Caucasian, with shoulder-length blonde hair, and was seen wearing a white, short-sleeved blouse, a pleated skirt with black and white design, and white shoes with 1 or 2 inch heels, was said to last be carrying a notepad and looking out the window near the penthouse elevator where Nicole disappeared. Police would show residents in the apartment building a composite drawing of this woman, in hopes that she could be identified. But 4 decades later, we still have no clue who she was. If she existed and wasn't involved, why didn't she just come forward? And if she did exist and was involved, it may make sense as to what may have happened to Nicole, because a young child may trust a woman. They would definitely trust a woman more than a man, especially if this woman may have told her, I have a child your age that wants to play with you. Come over here. I just baked some cookies. You can meet her and she can go down to the pool with you. Could a woman have been the kidnapper? Maybe a woman looking for a child of her own. Although I think 8 years old is quite old to abduct a child to do something like that. 8-year-olds, who know who they are, they know who their family is at that point. It's not the same as maybe like a 2-year-old. But that would have been the best case scenario, that, Nicole was kidnapped to be raised by another family. And that's kind of, it seems like what Art was maybe hoping, that one day she would just show up on his doorstep with, his grandchildren and be like, I'm home. But, women being involved in things like this isn't, talked about often. We often think it's a male PDF file of sorts that would do something like this, but it's possible, especially since there is this attractive woman that was spotted apparently on Nicole's floor right before she disappeared. Who spotted her? The timeline of all of that, how she just vanished in the thin air, I don't know. There's not much details surrounding that. However, it is weird that this woman was seen there around the exact same time Nicole disappeared, and this woman also disappeared seemingly. People have also wondered if Nicole's kidnapper could have been someone who didn't live in the building, but was possibly visiting that day, such, as an ex-boyfriend or maybe a son of someone. Could the mother have covered and said that her son wasn't there that day? And could someone like that be responsible? That could make sense why this person has never been found, never been located, why Nicole isn't located. Could that person have been leaving and, had just gotten into the elevator? Nicole was there and they were going down to the garage to, leave or something and took her. Or could it have been someone like a building worker or possibly one of the delivery drivers? Or could it have been a PDF file that was living in the building or working in the building or near the building that Nicole may have known against, like a maintenance man, like maybe a lifeguard, something like that, who she may have felt comfortable with and comfortable if they asked her, come over here. Because clearly police missed something here. There is something we don't know. There is clues or evidence or information that just is never gotten by the police, was never gathered by them, or else Nicole would have been found. There's so many missing pieces in Nicole's case, despite how much time, money, effort was put into it. And that is why we are sitting at 40 years now with no answers. But could it be something out of the box like that? That it was someone that was just visiting? Hopefully one day we will know, and hopefully for Nicole's family's sake, they will know as well. As I said, Nicole's parents were on the older side when they had her, when she went missing. So her mother passed away without answers. Her father is just getting older and older. If he is still alive at this point in time, I couldn't see any obituary or anything for him passing, but he would be in his mid-80s right now. If he is still alive, time is of the essence. Art needs answers. Her family needs answers. Nicole needs justice. Art saying, quote, "I hope that someday she'll come back and give us the answers to the mystery," end quote. Let's take one more good look at Nicole because maybe, hopefully, it will spark someone's memory. In 1986, Nicole is described as standing 4 feet tall and weighing around 52 pounds. She had a petite build, good teeth, soft speech, a gap between her 2 front teeth. Her ears were pierced, and a birthmark on her right forehead at the hairline. She was last seen wearing a peach-colored one-piece bathing suit with colored stripes at the front, a green headband, and red canvas shoes. She was carrying a peach-colored blanket and purple towel. These are some age enhancement photos depicting how she may look as she got older. If you have any information as to what happened to Nicole, please contact the authorities. I'll have the information down below. And as always, I hope you all stay safe out there, lock your windows and doors, and I hope to see you in the next video.